Every month, I write several blog articles that connect to the themes that we explore within She Lives Intentionally. And while writing for the theme of honoring yourself, it it hit me, and I realized that I needed to go back to something that happened to me years ago. It was the summer before my senior year in high school, and I had come back from a volleyball camp that I had gone to since I think I was in fourth grade. But this one in particular was important because even though every year I'd gone and I'd played against girls that were from bigger schools, this one was big because even though I was from the smallest of the towns there, I won MVP. And I was so proud of it that when I came home after the camp, I had shared it with my then boyfriend at the time. And I didn't think anything of it until I found out later that he had shared with some other mutual friends that how egocentric I was. And we talk about these things in She Lives Intentionally, where you may have had these experiences from your past that suddenly you realize have shaped you in so much of your life. And I think it was in that moment that I became very much someone who was almost overly cognizant of how I showed up. If I was too cocky, if I looked like I was being too braggy, that it was much better to just be humble and to not say those things out loud. The more I talk with other women around this, I find that many women have similar instances where society has told us that we shouldn't celebrate. It's not just that we move fast. We have literally been conditioned to believe that if we honor ourselves in some outward way, that means we're selfish, indulgent, or maybe it isn't even something that we should feel overly proud to have earned. And because of that, we end up downplaying things, or we rush past whatever happened to get to the next thing, or we truly wait for that, dare I say, that shiny, monumental event to take place before we allow ourselves to say, I can be proud of that. So this month, as I've been reflecting on my own year, I've really tried to practice something different. I've been slowing down long enough to acknowledge the process that I've gone through. I've really been trying to name those moments that I normally would have just, pushed to the side. And what I've been recognizing is there is a version of myself who keeps showing up even when no one else can see the effort behind it. And that in and of itself, especially when building a new business, has to be acknowledged. Entrepreneurs, I feel like we are part crazy as well as ambitious because there's so much stuff behind the scenes that no one sees. And I've learned this year in a huge, huge way is if you don't recognize that, it can feel as if there's almost no wins happening. So this theme, when coming up with it, was very self-serving because I knew I needed this. I knew I had to do it differently than I've done it in the past. My guest is Melissa Payne, a She Lives Intentionally member and best-selling author whose novels explore redemption and truth. Her characters reflect the kind of courage sometimes women rarely name in themselves. It's the quiet, persistent, deeply human kind. Melissa brings a perspective rooted in creative depth and emotional honesty that feels so fitting for this conversation. In this episode, we explore what honoring yourself really looks like and why it feels uncomfortable, and how we can start naming courage we've ignored along the way. I'm Marnie Andes, and this is the She Lives Intentionally podcast. Melissa, what's something you did this year that you're proud of?
Ooh, something I'm proud of. Isn't that funny? We don't often think of the things that we're proud of for ourselves. What comes to mind is like several things I could have told you about my children, my family. I don't often think, what about me? I think what I'm proud of for this year, and this is going to be a running theme for us today, is it hasn't been an easy year creatively. And I rely on my creativity for work and to do what I want to do what I love to do. And it's been so challenging and continues to be, by the way. And I think what I'm proud of is that despite that, I pushed through it. Despite it, and it didn't look pretty. I mean, I don't look back and go, it was just, it's amazing how much I pushed through this and nobody knew. I let people know. I mean, hopefully not exhaustively. Well, fortunately, you're not interviewing my friends, but and my family. But I feel like I pushed through it. I shared those pieces that were tough when it was appropriate, so that I could get it out. And then I just kept pushing. We tend to jump immediately to, well, if I talk about myself, then I'm talking about myself. I'm not sharing about other things. And that's egocentric. That's focused on the wrong thing, right? We tend to kind of go there. So it is hard to say, oh, here are the things that I did without feeling like you're bragging.
Right. Agreed. Well, and that is what we're going to talk about today. I mean, this whole idea that our theme this month in December, it's so fitting because we're doing sometimes these things at the end of the year to wrap up, is to honor whatever we've done. Many times people are thinking like, okay, what did I set out to do? Did I accomplish that? So it's the last month of the year, but it's also looking at the year holistically. And so I really felt like it was important for women to think of how to honor themselves without it feeling selfish, because this idea of like, okay, once you accomplish something, then you're supposed to move onward and upward.
Hmm.
And, that what I've learned in the research, and we'll talk a little bit about that too, I'll bring that up, is, there's something to be said that the more we downplay things and not honor it, it's not necessarily an example of not being egocentric. It's actually something that contributes to this idea of that then when the win does happen, we minimize those even more
Hmm.
so. The big
You
wins
know,
get small.
I know you're from the Midwest too, but I think there is that Midwest quality of humbleness is exalted. Humbleness is so good. It's so wonderful to be. And I'm not saying it's not good to be humble. It is. We don't want to always put ourselves forward. We don't want to always put everything that we have accomplished ahead, right? However, it can also be this thing that kind of holds us back, this idea that we shouldn't celebrate the good things, that we shouldn't say, hey, this happened to me. I'm really happy. I'm really proud of myself. So I think there's that kind of fine line that we walk. And I do think it's a Midwestern kind of thing, but I don't know. It could come from all over the country. It's just how my
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if someone's saying, "Oh no, I grew up on another side of the country or on the coast or something like that," and this resonates, or is it something? I mean, I'm gonna bring up some a study that was done on gender psychology, and so then the question begs is, well, then is it also maybe mostly a woman thing that
Mm.
we, as women, do we face this more so? But I think it's a great way that you kicked it off, because I think that's probably one of those things that influences whether or not we share things about ourselves, or we feel not just whether or not it's okay we can honor ourselves, but feel moved to do it in a way where that's natural. That would be something I would celebrate.
Right. And what if we flip it around and say, by sharing ourselves and then asking about others. We create space for others to share about themselves. So it's not just, oh, me. It is, hey, I want to share this with you. What have you done? Or can you share something about yourself too? In more natural conversations too, than just a podcast, right? Or
Right.
1 month where somebody tells us to do it, of more of thinking when we share, others share too.
Oh, I love that. Um, Let me ask you the broader question then to get into it, which is when you think about honoring yourself, what does that mean to you?
Again, it doesn't that change throughout our lifetimes, but right now it really means honoring what do I need emotionally, creatively, what do I need in a day to get to the end of that day and feel like I've done what I set out to do, right? I've followed my intentions. So I think it's honoring that process of really asking myself that, what do I need? Do I need to do I need to run today? Do I need a sit down coffee with my husband? Do I need to outline an entire chapter? Like, what do I need? Instead of looking at what I didn't do or what's going to be hard about that day, acknowledging the hardness, but then also just saying, okay, well, then it's going to be hard. This is going to be a challenging day. What do you need?
When do you think you came to that?
Much like my characters, where I write them as I get to know them, that's kind of my story too. I develop those ideas as I get to know myself. So I was not this person 20 years ago. Even a year ago, I might have had different thoughts. And I say this a lot about my stories when somebody says, "What's your favorite book?" And I say, "Well, I don't have really a favorite book because they all represent me and my writing at different stages of my own life." So in telling you like, oh, this is this thing I've come up with, I would say it's a rolling lesson. Like I'm constantly learning from people around me and myself. And so right now in this stage of life for me, where I am, this is what I realize I need. It's like a slow down. And probably because I am reaching that other side of life, right? I'm flipping over a little bit. So you want to pull back and say slow down. And so part of that slowing down is asking myself, what do I need? What do I want out of today?
So let me ask you this. Since you've already started to talk a little bit about writing, as an author, how do you honor your creative work, especially the parts that no one sees?
That's a tough one because once I get into my writing, that's where a whole lot of my insecurities still live. When I get into my writing, that's where I'm really having to push through and telling myself, you can do this, honoring myself. I do find it more there. I'm very confident in most aspects of my life, confident in my relationships, confident, and, every so often I'll have those moments. But when it comes to my career in writing, that's where my, confidence takes a hit. And that's kind of natural to it. So I just have to I love what you said about the things that nobody sees. Well, most of writing is all behind the scenes that nobody sees. Like the only people that see it, the people who I live with, right? The rest of it has that romantic feel of like, oh, you're a writer. You
Hmm.
must like go on exotic places and drink lots of whiskey while you're writing. And, you must do all these things. And I don't like, I sit down and I work. So it's not as romantic looking as it sounds to people. And it is full of self-doubt. So that is where I have to put and when you asked me earlier, how do you honor yourself or how did you learn to do this? Writing has been the thing that has forced me. Writing and publishing books has forced me to slow it down and um, take the time to figure out how I'm going to work best that day, how I'm going to think best that day, ask myself what needs to happen, because otherwise it's hard to produce.
So talk me through what is a day that you're like, I'm not feeling it today. What does that still look like for you as a writer?
Um, it's been nearly every day lately. I'm in a very tough book right now. But when I'm under the gun, when there is a deadline that is, and that's an example of right now, then it looks like sitting down and making myself do the work. There is no off button. There is no procrastination. It is facing the work head on.
Hmm.
And that's why it looks the way it looks. On the outside, it could look like me staring out a window for a few minutes and internally beating myself up for not being more creative, and then getting back to it and just, you just kind of like inundate yourself in your world and your characters. And honestly, right now I have a pretty tight deadline and I have a pretty massive edit, and it seems a little impossible, particularly when you add life into that. So I have my family coming next week. I have all my kids coming home. There is no isolation in this, right? I mean, right now I'm isolated. It's just me in this house, but that's looming, that's coming, and I want to be there. Part of what I say to myself is I want to be there for all the family moments. I love the family moments, but because my work is from home and intertwined with everything I do every day, I have to be very intentional about, okay, well, then I have to sit down and get this work done. I have to write. The creativity has to come. It's a lot to ask of yourself, actually. um, I'd like to be, in a beautiful cabin somewhere or on a beach and being creatively energized that way. But that's just not life as a writer or really as a person. You can have your vacations, but you got to come back to life. You got to find within your daily life, work, life, relationships, how do you honor yourself within that?
Even what the example that you gave, I mean, I think about that as the example of kids are coming home. I want to spend time with the family. The holiday is coming up, but yet you're still having to carve out the time. Yes, because you have a deadline. Yes, because, and I certainly don't understand all the things. It'll be interesting for us to get into maybe a couple of these things as to maybe why this particular book is hard or this moment is hard. But you're honoring yourself in doing that. I think what I see is examples around me where, and I will say more so that I find women will say that I'm going to have to just put that to the side because the kids are coming home. And so I guess that isn't going to get done. You have a publisher that you have a deadline with. Other people, whether they, have a department that that they are responsible for. There's certain things we all have somewhat deadlines that we have to meet,
Mhm.
whatever we're doing. I just don't want people to hear that and go, well, she has a publisher that's requiring her to do this. So yes, she's going to have to take time away from her family. I wonder if there's the examples of, but yes, I also still do that, whether this deadline was or wasn't looming.
Well, I think a lot of people have, if it's not your work, although if you're working outside the home, you're likely taking some of that home with you. It's still in your head. Deadline is a very symbolic, I have this deadline, but we have other things in our lives. We might have ailing parents. We might have a friendship that feels like it needs attention and we can't give it the attention it needs. We might have children who need something incredibly special from us, or it could be all sorts of things, can be those figurative deadlines. And I don't know if it's all women, or if it's a female thing, but I do think we often have those looming around us. And if we don't meet every single one of them, then we're not doing our work. We're a failure. We see the things that we don't do perfectly. Instead of honoring the process and honoring how much we do every day, we see the things that, oh, well, I meant to do this. Here's my intention. I meant to do this and I fell short.
Mm-hmm.
And then we focus on how we fell short instead of, well, what did we do to get, like, how much did we do in the process? So I guess that's the acknowledging how you are in the moment, in the process, and focusing on that instead of focusing on what you didn't do, because we do that. I just believe we do that far too much. And it doesn't serve us, and it doesn't serve the people around us either. It doesn't serve our relationships.
Right. I tend to find that the events, the experiences, the things that didn't happen the way you wanted to, or that fell short, many times are just the things that go behind the scenes. Those are the ones we're completely silent about, which I actually think there's some healthy pieces of saying, I did this. Again, here was the process. I grew from that. No, it didn't end up looking the way that I had envisioned it looking the way it is, and I'm still okay with that. Or no, I actually am not okay
Yeah.
with that. And I'm trying to figure out how to navigate the fact that I do not like how that finished.
Absolutely. And that's the positive outcome of it, right? That's like saying, it's okay that I didn't do this well, but I don't like it. So I'm going to work harder for that. And I know this is so high level. So I'm trying to think of more specific examples, but I think that anyone listening can apply this to their life. Like, okay, what am I doing right now where I'm focusing on what I didn't do or how I was short in something instead of focusing on how I got there and then evaluating from there, right?
Mm. I've read three of your books now, and I think even when I was looking at people's reviews of your books, that a common thing that is talked about in almost all of your books is that your characters often navigate truth, courage, and second chances. And I thought it would be interesting to hear how you honor your characters as you write them.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Because my characters, I've always felt my characters, well, they are based on real types of people, not one person. Oftentimes they are, conglomeration of a lot of different people and issues and experiences. But those experiences or that type of a person is reflective in our communities, in our friendships, in our lives. So somebody reading my book might see themselves in a character. And that character could have experienced the loss of a child, addiction, loss of a loved one, to suicide. Like we see ourselves in characters and the things that we read. And so I honor those characters by making sure that they are true to who they are, that if somebody picks up my book, reads it, and has that experience, they feel seen when they're reading a story of mine. They don't feel like they've been written into a story with no care as a plot device or as, oh, won't this be a funny event or a sad event to make people feel? If someone feels while reading my story, I sure hope it comes from a genuine place. And that my most important thing is that readers feel seen if they identify with characters.
I guess to the point of where you were saying that this has been a really interesting time for you creatively, what's the hard piece for you right now?
Mhm.
Is it what you just described and how you honor your characters, or is it something else?
It's kind of both. Mostly it's structural, so it's the structure of this story and my brain not wanting to hold all the things in it that it can usually hold. Um, and moments of feeling a little on the duller side of things, and
Mm.
not as sharp as I'm used to being. But as a consequence, it is then trickier for me to stay in my character's experiences, to stay in their whatever they're grieving or whatever they're struggling with. And that makes it hard for me then as a writer, because then I just feel like I'm writing a character, but I'm not emotionally attached to them. So that it's a great question, Marnie, because when I think about it, I've been saying it's the structure, but I think because of the structure and my fun brain, I am not identifying and connecting with the characters in the moments that I'm writing like I'm used to.
You'll often hear actors talk about that when they have to take on one of like the Oscar winning type roles, that they had to almost become the character that they were playing. Is there similarities? I mean,
Hmm.
I don't write fiction like you do. Although I feel like yours has a twist on fiction though as
Oh,
well.
really?
And now I think I just dropped in like a second question. But I guess, do you have to take on the character, every single one of them, in order to write them? Or what is that process for you?
Yeah, I think that we do a little bit, not quite the way an actor would, because I'm not stepping on screen and trying to convince someone that I am that person. And so that's a little different in writing. I'm not trying to convince someone that I have had these experiences, as the writer, even though I haven't had these experiences. So I haven't, I haven't lost a child. I'm not trying to write from a point of, oh, but maybe I have. No. So I do put on that, I guess, much like an actor. Yeah, I guess I do put on that person's experiences. I wear them and I put myself, um, into their shoes so that I can write them better. That requires, though, for me, and it does for actors too, a whole lot of research, a whole lot of empathy, and this is where I think writing and reading and characters parallels actual life, because I believe as people We need to do that with others. I really just have to work from the inside out. And sometimes I don't even visualize my characters till the end or after I've started writing them because I'm really trying to get inside, how does this person feel? How does this character, how are they going to react when another character questions them about A, B, or C? I need to understand them in a way that when I do that, when I write dialogue, when I write scenes, I understand what they're going to do and how they're going to interact. It's the way I write stories in general. I want readers to feel the characters from the inside out. I want readers to experience this with them. I want them to develop an empathy for this character. I've done this in other books, like in Memories in the Drift. That one was probably the most like literal example for me of why it's important to make sure my characters are as vivid on the page and as deep and as complex as I can make them. That was about a woman with anterograde amnesia, which is the inability to create short-term memories. And um, she's lost a child. And when we pick up with her, it's 10 years later, where she cannot remember the years since losing her child. So every day she's starting the day by remembering, kind of rooting herself in where she is, what she needs to, and then getting through that day, often learning things that she couldn't remember. She only remembers 10 years prior. Well, many years after I wrote that book, I had a friend of mine from high school reach out to me. Long story short, she ended up sharing with me that she developed anterograde amnesia after a bout of COVID. And when she called me, it was 1 year later, and she woke up every day thinking it was a year prior. She'd lost everything. She was a speech therapist. She couldn't work. She has 4 kids, one with very special needs, and she couldn't care for him. Her husband had become her caretaker. It was much like my character. She didn't even know I'd written this book. She knew I'd written other books. She wanted her husband to suggest that she write about her feelings. She said, I don't know any writers except this girl from high school. So when she reached out to me and I told her about this book, she was, very excited to end up reading it all in one day, sending me like screenshots as she read it and telling me this is exactly what it feels like to her. And so that is always an incredible reminder to me that these characters that I, like actors, put on, I become, I do so to make sure that anyone who reads these stories, if they feel seen, they feel as though I've taken the time to create a character that is multidimensional.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, because that, I think that is probably why I said what I said earlier, which was you write fiction, but I think there's a twist of nonfiction in it, because every book I've read of yours, I almost have to remind myself that this hasn't actually happened. So it almost feels like, wait, was this a story that actually happened in
Hmm.
the 80s or something? And she's just like, changing their names to protect that. So that's kind of that's why I feel like it still feels like it's some truth to it. But that is part of your writing process, correct? You're going to these places.
Exactly. And there is truth to it. So in that book, it was an actual real place. It was a real, I didn't, it was Whittier, Alaska. And I'd seen a documentary on it. It's this very funky little town with a one-way tunnel that switches directions every 15 minutes and is shared with a train. It's the only way into the town by car. And most of the residents live in a 14-story high rise. So that town was so interesting to me because I listened to a resident who said, well, in this kind of a town, we don't always like each other and we don't always get along. But when something bad happens, we're always there to help each other out. So you're
Mm.
right when you say it seems like there's some nonfiction or truth to it or someone you might know, because frankly, it could be someone you know, or it could be a story that's true in some form or another, not in that exact form. But for me, that's what I love about fiction is the only piece of fiction in this is really these characters. I've made these people up. I've created this situation to put them in. But many times they are people you might know. They are situations maybe you know of or somebody could have found themselves in. So it's that like, one step removed from, well, this could be a true story for someone. And if I can make my character so real that you feel that piece too, I'm quite honored to if I have been able to do that for a reader.
One of the last books that we read in the community, and actually did a book club around, I remember sharing during our session with you that one of the characters, I didn't see me in the majority of that character for the book. I could certainly empathize with what that character was going through. Their lived experience was far different from mine, but it was at that point near the end of the book that I feel like I know how that character was able to maneuver through that part of the book in that
Hmm.
way, because it really resonated with me. It was, and I think that's for me. I mean, one, I find your books really easy to get sucked into. Like, I find that it doesn't take me long to read your books because I end up reading them for long periods of time in one shot. And I think that's the power that I've found, at least my experiencing reading your book, is that there'll be that character where they'll have something that's going on. And suddenly I'm like, that's it. That's that's how I felt in that situation. Or, oh, I know why that character has behaved that way because I see it now finally. And maybe the one that I'm, sharing that experience that I had recently with one of your books, maybe that, I don't know that that would have, it would not have affected me the same way had I read your book 10 years ago. It
Hmm.
wouldn't have, because I wouldn't have gone through that thing. And that's why I think is so, I think there's, in part one, I think people should read your books in general, but two, I, I really feel like what your books almost remind me each time is why it's so important to read stories like this, for people to, even if they don't know what to do with a feeling. I think there's so much that can be found in just reading that book, that if you have felt isolated, or you have felt maybe some things haven't, gone your way, or maybe things have really gone your way but you still don't feel connected to people, I feel like that's where your books take people, that they certainly have for me. And I, well, one, I want to just honor you for that, but I do have a question here, which is, I'm wondering if you would share just a little bit about, in general, what your process is of getting to the point of your, that you go, oh, I know what the book is, or I think I have an idea of what the angle of this next book is going to be. What do you go through to get to that place?
I'm typically starting when I brainstorm a book. I'm starting with what is the story I want to tell? What is the person I'm focusing on? And it really varies with each book. On my very first one, I was very much affected, and that was 10 years ago. And I was very much affected by when I had younger kids. There had been several accidents in downtown Denver where there had been hit and runs in crosswalks, and there were more than one that included a child in a stroller, or a child in general being walked with their parents. And it affected me deeply as a mother of young kids. I just could not imagine that kind of a loss. And on my very first one, that was one of my characters. It was a woman who'd been a single mother and lost her child in a horrific way. And we pick up with her 8 years later. So that just really spoke to me, and it made me, she just became part of that story. But I didn't want her, it wasn't about all that she had lost. It was about how could she retain all of that beauty of her son and move forward in life in a beautiful way. And that was one character and a part of her story. And so each
Mm-hmm.
one can often be deeply personal, something that's affected me in the news, something that's affected people I know, something that's affected perhaps me personally in some way. And finding a story that shows, I've said this before, but I don't like perfect stories. I don't like perfect characters. I like the mess, because that's what life is for all of us. It's chaos sometimes, it's a mess other times, it's not perfect, and I don't think we should ever strive to be perfect. And so I like my stories with these big, messy stories and big, messy characters who have not made the best choices all the time. And when we put them all together into a framework, into a book, what happens? And so that's where I like to go with my stories. And I think it does parallel life in general. I might not have had that experience of my one character, but I have other experiences. I have the fear of losing a child. I have the fear of when my parents pass, and I have the experience of losing my father. And so those are the things that unite us. You know, Marnie, I wish more people read or more and like just inundated themselves with story, because I think that's how we connect with others. I think that's how we understand the human condition more deeply, is by learning of other experiences, because we all want the same things. We want love, we want belonging.
I'm glad your stories are messy. I'm glad they reflect real life, because I think in a world where many times we're presented too much perfection, we're presented only what's in front of the camera, so to speak. We don't see the behind the scenes. We don't see how much work it took to get there. We only see the output.
Hmm.
And then I think that in turns reinforces the idea that, well, I only want to see the output. I don't want to maybe hear about what it took for that person to get there. And then I believe that goes into another vicious cycle, which is then minimizing our own. I mean, and that's one of the things that we talked about at the beginning, and you actually shared it. I was actually going to share some research around this whole idea of benefiting from sharing and honoring what you've done, even the small things, even the things that didn't work out, because that matters. It's definitely goes hand in hand with why it's so important that people share stories. When people say, and I know I've seen this even in the last 10 years, where people are like, your story matters. You need to share your story. And when you just hear that, I feel like people are thinking, oh, that's just what we're all saying to each other, that we need to hear each other's stories. But it really is real that people need to be willing to share those stories. And I do think by people reading about characters that have, certain feelings, certain situations, that they can start to see their story and make it more real or more possible for them to share it. I think that goes hand in hand with this whole honoring
Right.
piece.
It does. And you just said something. When we say share our stories, I think sometimes we think, well, I've got to have this amazing beginning to end story, but we're all in the middle of our stories. So we're just sharing vignettes. We're sharing little pieces of ourselves that give insight into who we are as a person at that moment, right? I just came off a girls' weekend. Some close friends of mine, we just went to Estes. We had a lovely few days together. And it was full, as all of us know at girls' weekends, of
Mhm.
sharing little stories, a little successful story of, say, a parenting moment, a not successful moment, a disastrous parenting moment, former relationships, current relationship, but little stories. And they're all like just giving insight into where we are at that moment. And that's how we connect, right? And that's how we learn about each other. And I think that's exactly what I put into my books. That's a story, but each of those characters have little micro stories of their own that they share within a larger book. But I am a big proponent that that's what we need to do as people, because that's how we learn about each other and that's how we share. We do it anyway. I just sometimes think we don't name it. But I think it's one of the most important parts of interpersonal relationships.
And the fact that it's like these short snippets of what did work, what didn't work, beautiful endings, disastrous, things that people are navigating. I mean, to me, that's what goes hand in hand with why it's so valuable to share the stories and to honor those things. Culturally, women have been taught to equate humility with likability and self-celebration with arrogance. But research in gender psychology actually reveals that women who acknowledge their accomplishments build not only confidence but credibility, both personally and professionally. When we name our growth out loud, when we model visibility that liberates others from the myth of effortless success. I mean, I think that's, to me, it's why it matters that we honor the successes along the way, or we honor the fact that we're in the process, is because twofold. One is it's actually okay to say not everything is working out. But the other reason why I think it's okay is what they found in this research, which is this idea that if we don't, not only are we giving not only do we start to assume that the only output that anybody cares about is me showing that I won or I succeeded or I got the promotion or whatever that is, but then we're actually affecting everyone around us because we're making it look as though it was effortless, that it just, oh, wow, that big thing just did happen to her.
Imagine picking up a book and it said, and it told you about a character and everything. It was the end of a book, and it just told you all of the things that she had accomplished and where she was at that moment. Because of all, like, you would miss all the meat, you would miss all the things that you could identify with. And you would just say, well, good for them. Aren't they a successful, wonderful, adjusted person? But you wouldn't know what it took to get to that moment in time. I oftentimes get people saying, I wish you would write another book about those characters. I wish you would have kept going. But that's what I think is so beautiful about stories that end at a moment in time where whatever we got through, and now we're sitting in this moment and enjoying this moment. Because I know, as in my own life, your life, these characters' lives, something else is going to come along later or next or the next day and challenge them or me or you in a whole new way. And now we start again. And that's life.
Mm-hmm.
That is the ups and downs and the beautiful ebbs and flows of living.
So before we get into the closing questions that I ask everyone, I want to ask you this question. And of course, this is just from, your perspective or your experience through it, but I'm just imagining a woman who maybe feels disconnected from her own accomplishments or the things that she has been able to do throughout her life, or even just this year. What's a small way that you would suggest to her that she could start honoring herself again?
I think we often just shut down when we're not feeling good about how we're doing. We don't want to share that. Just like we've been talking about this whole time. We don't want to share what's really hard. We don't want to share what we're super disappointed in. And being vulnerable with people that we trust, with those in our lives, I think allows us to have a different perspective. And I think honor yourself by allowing yourself to be imperfect. If this is a tough year, it's okay. What are you going to learn from this year? What are you going to take with you? What maybe has to stay with you? Maybe it's tough because it's something that's not ever going to change. And so how do you take that with you and move forward regardless of how it's negatively affected you in the past? How can you take it with you and look towards something that will be benefit you more? And I ultimately believe we are meant to be in community. We are meant to
Mm-hmm.
share with others. We are not meant to do things alone. And anyone who believes that, take a second look. Find that one trusted person in your life and share. But we are meant to be in community. So, and sometimes when things are super, super hard, we narrow our world so that we're the only ones suffering in it. And so, just remembering to let other people in and to be vulnerable.
I agree with that. I mean, I think it's hard. The natural tendency is, oh, if something's not going right, I need to like stay close to myself and figure it out myself, and then I can come back out when everything is working again. And actually, it's quite the opposite. At least in my experience, and I echo everything you're saying about community. What I found is that when I'm struggling, I need to get out. I need to hear what other
Right.
people are doing. I need to be able to share it out loud so that I can start to hear myself and maybe be able to even get some feedback on how to work through it. Okay, I want to go to closing. I don't actually want to go to closing questions, but it's that time. Um, let me start with the first one, which is, what does living intentionally look like in this season of your life?
I intend to write 20 pages today and get through the super tough time with Rusty, my main character. And well, let's say in that day, 7 things happen to keep me from getting to those 20 pages, and I only end up with 15, but I get a pretty good start on Rusty. So acknowledging that, okay, I didn't succeed with what I intended, but I got there. I'm
Mm-hmm.
on the way. And so I think just that is where I go with that, because I think we all have the best of intentions, but we don't always nail those intentions, right? So that's okay. And
Yeah.
I try to give myself the space to be okay. I don't always. I'm coming off sounding like I'm the most healthy practice person, but no, this is me. When I struggle, I struggle. And so I have to remind myself a lot.
What's one shift, big or small, that helped you live true to yourself?
Um, yeah, I think actually I just said it. It's being okay with not being the best at every moment and loving myself through that and saying it's all right. There are times, and this is just perimenopausal mood shifts, where I have a day where I just want to cry all day for no reason whatsoever. None. I'm happy. I'm content. Life's pretty good. And I just want to cry. So that's an extreme example of that. But I just have learned the shift is I'm okay with not being okay.
What's one thing you've learned about life that you'd want every woman to know?
Make genuine friendships. I have really leaned into my friendships lately, my female friendships, and they just grow. And I don't mean make a ton of friendships, just make genuine friendships. People that really support you and make you a better person with that friendship. I think that's what we need is we just I have found that's what I need more of, is more of those genuine friendships.
Thank you for spending time today. This was great.
Thank you, Marnie. I always love talking to you.
If something here stirred something in you, don't let it sit. You can learn more at shelivesintentionally.com.